Hi everyone, my name is Casey Duplantis and I'm going to be the instructor for today's training session. Today we're going to be talking about hand protection. A few topics we're going to cover are who is required to wear hand protection, when is it necessary, different types of gloves, how to properly wear those gloves, and how to properly put on and take off gloves. The training requirements for this session is found in OSHA 29 CFR Part 1910 General Industry Training Requirements. Hand protection is part of Subpart I Personal Protective Equipment Standard Number 1910.132. The requirement states that the employer shall provide training to each employee who is required by this section to use PPE. Now, the entire requirement includes all personal protective equipment. However, the purpose of this training will only cover hand protection, and we will only cover Parts F, numbers 1, 2, and 3. There are several benefits in undergoing this training session. Workplace hazards will always exist. They are inevitable and they are present in some way in every industry. Proper training and knowing what to do in a given situation can help prevent accidents. Another point is that our hands are very important to everyday life. We use them for everything throughout the day, and having an accident at work that permanently impedes hand movement can be debilitating to life. After a permanent injury occurs, you can't go back to doing the same things you once did before, and this includes the job duties at work. This training might not absolutely prevent an accident from occurring, but it can ensure that you are prepared. This course requires 100% attendance in the lecture. It also requires 100% participation in the activity at the end of this training session. There will be no written exams or other means of testing required. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, hand injuries account for over 1 million emergency room visits annually. The population of this study was the entire United States, and it only includes workplace injuries. This statistic makes hand injuries one of the most injured body parts in the workplace per year. 70% of the emergency room visits included people who were not wearing any type of hand protection. The other 30% were wearing damaged gloves or inadequate hand protection. The percentages found by this study proves the need for hand protection training. It is possible that many of the ER visits could have been avoided if proper hand protection was worn. The next topic of discussion is who should wear hand protection and when is it necessary. It all starts with a workplace hazard assessment. This assessment identifies the physical and health hazards in the workplace. It begins with a walkthrough to examine the facility, and when the walkthrough is complete, the employer organizes and analyzes the data. This data should determine the proper types of personal protective equipment required. It is also good practice to periodically reassess for any changes in the environment. If the assessment reveals need for hand protection, the employer is required to provide the proper equipment. Some potential hazards that would require hand protection include skin absorption of harmful substances, chemical or thermal burns, electrical dangers, bruises, abrasions, cuts, punctures, fractures, and amputations. If any of these hazards are present, the individual should wear the appropriate hand protection. The workplace hazard assessment is a crucial component to hand safety in general. If the potential hazards aren't identified, it is impossible for an employee to be properly protected. Overall, anyone who can be exposed to the potential hazards listed earlier should use hand protection. Now let's look at the different types of hand protection available. There are 4 categories of gloves. Gloves that are made of leather, canvas, or metal mesh, gloves that are made of fabric, gloves that are chemical and liquid resistant, and gloves that are made of insulated rubber. There are also individual types of gloves that can fit into each category. The first category of glove is made up of 4 different types of materials. Leather gloves protect against sparks, moderate heat, blows, chips, and rough objects. Next is the aluminized glove. This glove provides reflective and insulative protection against heat and requires an insert made of synthetic materials to protect against heat and cold. Next is the aramid fiber glove. This glove protects against heat and cold. It is cut and abrasive resistant, and it wears well. Lastly is the synthetic glove. This glove offers protection against heat and cold. It is cut and abrasive resistant and may withstand some dilute acids, although this will not stand up to alkalis and solvents like a chemical resistant glove would. Overall, this category of gloves will protect good against cuts and burns and sustained heat. The second category of gloves is made up of fabric and coated fabric gloves. These gloves are made of cotton or other fabrics to provide varying degree of protection. Fabric gloves protect against dirt, slivers, chafing, and abrasions. They do not provide sufficient protection for use with rough, sharp, or heavy materials. Adding a plastic coating will strengthen some fabric gloves, and they will offer some slip-resistant qualities. The third category of glove is a chemical and liquid-resistant glove. These gloves are made of rubber or plastic or a combination of both. And as a general rule, the thicker the glove, the more protection. However, this concept can have a negative impact on safety because a thick glove will impair hand grip and hand dexterity. The last category of gloves includes an insulated rubber glove. These gloves are made of thick rubber and used when dealing with electricity. On this slide, we have some pictures of the different types of gloves. At the top left, we have a fabric glove. At the top right, we have a chemical and liquid resistant rubber glove. At the bottom right, we have an insulated rubber glove. And at the bottom left, we have a leather glove. The next topic is how to properly wear gloves. There are a few things to consider, the first being glove thickness. A glove that is thin will have good touch sensitivity and dexterity, however, it will have poor chemical resistance. A thick glove will have a better chemical resistance, but hand movement may be harder. Ultimately, when it comes to a glove thickness, evaluate the job duty and try to plan for how much hand movement is needed, and if chemicals are going to be used. Another thing to consider is the size of the glove. A glove that is too big may snag on equipment or on a machine. There is also the risk for it to fall off. When running a machine, you don't want to have to constantly readjust your gloves because they are too big. Doing so will take your attention from other job duties that are just as important. A glove that is too small can bind the hand and make it harder to move your fingers. Also, the pressure from the hand movement can tear easily. Always check your gloves for tears and damage. They should not be used if they are impaired. Putting on gloves is a pretty straightforward process. Most types require a right and a left hand glove, so it is important to make sure you have one of each. Chemical and liquid resistant gloves will fit on either hand, so it's not important to have one of each. Choose the glove that is appropriate for the task at hand. The potential hazards revealed in the workplace hazard assessment should show what type is best. The employer should tell you what type is best, but it's still good practice to know for yourself. Make sure the gloves fit properly. Most gloves come in standard sizes, which is small through extra large. It may be appropriate to try different sizes on to see what fits the best. When it comes to putting them on, hold the glove near the wrist opening and pull onto your hand. Sometimes this is tricky when putting on chemical and liquid resistant gloves, but it's just a learning process. Just make sure you don't tear them. Once the gloves are on, you should recheck them to make sure there are no defects and that they fit properly. Taking off gloves is also a fairly simple process, except for when dealing with chemical and liquid resistant gloves. It is very important to make sure that you don't touch your bare skin with the outside of the gloves. There is a special technique used to ensure that this doesn't happen, and I will demonstrate how to do so on the next portion of this training. There is a risk of contamination if the gloves aren't taken off properly. Obviously, you don't have to worry about this if you're using leather gloves or metal mesh gloves to work a machine. This technique is only necessary for gloves when dealing with harmful substances. When most gloves are taken off, they can be stored and used again, as long as they aren't damaged. Once again, the exception is chemical and liquid resistant gloves. Once these gloves are taken off, they should be disposed of and not used again. Alright, so now I'm going to demonstrate how to properly take off a pair of gloves. Here I have my gloves. They are latex gloves, so this would be the process you would use if your gloves were contaminated with some kind of chemical or something else that you didn't want to get on your skin. So what you're going to do with one hand, grab at the base of one glove, and then pull that glove completely inside out like so, and pull it completely off, and then bundle it up in this hand. And then with this hand, you're going to take the fingers and slide it under like so, and then pull completely off where the other glove is encased in the other one. And then you have your gloves that you can dispose of in the proper area. At this time, I would like everyone to practice taking off a pair of chemical resistant gloves. Follow the demonstration I just performed and use this picture as a guide. This concludes our training session. Remember, your employer should always provide you with the appropriate hand protection when it's necessary. Always inspect the gloves before you use them, and make sure you choose the right gloves for the right job. Always follow the correct procedures for taking off gloves, especially when they're contaminated. All gloves should fit comfortable and protect you from the hazards that are identified.